In addition, it has adopted more ambitious goals that reflect the current national and global objectives. So as I mentioned before, the Clearwater Greenprint 2.0, as well as the previous Clearwater Greenprint, is grounded in climate science. It looks at and it considers the impacts such as rising temperatures, increased storm intensity and rising seas, and declining availability of potable water. To quickly take a look at some of the current conditions within the city of Clearwater, a city with a population of approximately 115,000 according to the 2019 ACS estimates. The city of Clearwater has seen a kind of a change in the way the emissions, the concentrations of emissions have been presented between 2007 and 2018, and this is according to the latest greenhouse gas inventory. And so essentially what's happened is the share of emissions from transportation has increased compared to the share of emissions from energy, as well as solid waste. Looking forward into the future, if Duke Energy were to carry on with their carbon neutral goals, the total emissions within the city are due to decrease, but it should be noted that the share of emissions from transportation are projected to increase with time. Taking a quick look at some of the federal and state policies that were considered when putting together the Clearwater Greenprint, I'd just like to call attention to the Massachusetts versus EPA ruling, the Clean Energy Jobs and Innovation Act, and the new administration, and those priorities, including rejoining of the Paris Climate Agreement. From the state policy perspective, the Florida Energy and Climate Commission was dissolved some time ago. The Florida Senate Resolution 1572 was adopted, and finally Senate Bill 178 allowed for, or rather required, SLIP studies, that is sea level impact projection studies for any state-financed coastal construction projects. Moving on to the model documents that went into the Clearwater Greenprint, we took a look at the Atlanta Climate Action Plan, the Clean Energy Atlanta Plan, the City of Largo LEAP Plan, the Orlando Greenworks Plan, as well as the St. Petersburg ISAP Plan. So these are all sort of regional or somewhat local plans and initiatives. And some of the takeaways from those plans included things like clear definition of report sections, outlining goals and actions for accomplishment, use of summary matrices to sort of easily convey these concepts. So getting into the actual meat of the document, I'm just going to quickly show you the overall report outline. This first slide shows you the introductory section contents. Moving on into the specific strategies. So the strategies are broken down into what we call core areas. And then the appendices. I'd like to draw your attention just for a moment to the implementation and measurement methodologies located in Appendix 2, as well as the Appendix 3 climate change science appendices, which summarize, I believe, the IPCC report, the latest IPCC report. The document contains a green glossary, which should provide members of the general public a good reference for some of the key terms that are used throughout the document, keeping it user-friendly. While on the subject of user-friendliness, the document itself is intended to be provided in a PDF or digital format, and it contains symbology that can be interacted with and direct users to additional information about various topics, and things from building energy efficiency to hazard mitigation. Looking at the overall report structure, as we did in the previous slides, let's get a little bit into some of the actual goals, objectives, and targets and strategies that are located within this document. You'll notice in this diagram, it's sort of each item flows into the next, becoming more and more specific as it goes, ending in strategies summarized in the items to the right. So the goals are fairly straightforward. That would be reduction of citywide greenhouse gas emissions 25% below 2007 levels by 2035. and none. Reduction of citywide greenhouse gas emissions 80% below 2007 levels by the year 2050. Some of the objectives are outlined here. And again, they just grow more and more specific, and we can go through each one of these, not the objectives, but the strategies later on in this presentation. So I'm going to give you a moment. Okay, I'm going to move on. Worth mentioning is certain critical themes are 2025, medium 2030, and long 2050 timeframes for completion. Moving on to the specific strategies located within the document. I want to provide just a quick breakdown of them. So that's education and awareness, transportation, livability, water conservation, waste reduction, local food, green economy, and green energy in buildings. So each of these strategies are detailed. They contain detailed descriptions, so broken up further, and then they're tied to specific implementation and measurement methodologies. So with regard to education and awareness, just want to specify for you what those strategies actually entail, and that would be creating education materials about green best practices and programs. What I've listed here for you are the top methodologies. What we did as part of our evaluation was breaking down each of the strategies into essentially short, medium, and long term, as well as highest perceived cost versus benefit. And so the ones that you see in front of you now are essentially the ones that have been ranked the highest perceived benefit with the lowest perceived cost. So, and all of this is relative to the type of measure, which is why it has that qualifier perceived. So to just quickly run through some of these, for community education, again, we're starting with education and awareness, that core area. That would be possibly developing a GIS database for buildings. Then for municipal staff education, providing reusable mugs, potential measure there. For youth programs, setting aside funding for youth programming purposes, youth education programming. Moving on to green energy in buildings. So that would entail improving the citywide energy efficiency and finding ways to include renewables and natural gas within the city's energy portfolio. So the resource conservation program is one of the top methodologies identified. And what that might entail is measuring monthly kilowatt hours or gallons per day of usage before and after conservation and implementation at the user level. Local power generation. So they're just worth calling this out. There's some synergies between some of the measures, and that's why they're sort of combined. In total, there are about 50 individual strategies, and so each of those strategies has its own monitoring and evaluation methodologies, implementation and measurement methodologies. And there may be more than one. For green energy in buildings continued, there are more. There are also energy efficient streetlights. That might include negotiating a rebate for financing LED streetlight conversion. There's the municipal recommissioning plan and then that would be replace existing non-LED bulbs with LEDs. There's also updating digital system maps for natural gas availability for the natural gas conservation program. Moving on to transportation. There is that would entail reducing vehicle miles traveled and promoting complete streets and the use of transit and active transportation. Some of the top methodologies under transportation would include municipal telecommuting policies, just enabling workers to and expanding IT services to allow for telecommuting. The VMT reduction that I mentioned before, that might entail just some preliminary studies on ways that VMT could be reduced. Moving on to livability, that would entail promoting expansion of green space, equitable development, redevelopment, and environmentally friendly practices maintenance practices rather. Some of the top methodologies that were identified there would include development incentives. Some of these strategies, like I said before, can be coordinated with others, and this would be one of them, the development incentives. So that could be a revolving loan fund, letter of credit support, and then energy efficient streets and parking. That would include taking a look at some of the costs for the capital and the maintenance associated with embedded solar panels or integrated traffic flow technology. Green space expansion, use of P3s to transition underutilized land to green space. Moving on to water conservation, this one is fairly straightforward. And that would be reducing citywide water consumption through regulations and maintenance. Top methodology there, water conservation. And that would entail coordination with FDEP as well as the Southwest Florida Water Management District. Waste reduction, that would be educating the public about the importance of recycling. For waste reduction in particular, gathering the statistics and quantity of solid waste and the quantity of yard waste collected may be an effective implementation and measurement methodology there. Local food, that would be just providing education regarding urban agriculture, the importance of urban agriculture. One of the top methodologies there would be the community garden grant program and co-location of community gardens with farmers markets, convenient access. Finally, there's the green economy strategy, or excuse me, core area. And that would be promoting widespread adoption of sustainable business practices. The Green Guide is among the top methodologies, and that would entail creating designation criteria or registration program for green businesses. And that's it for my cursory review of some of the strategies. Again, there were over 50 in this document, and I'd just like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Floss.
Thank you.
Ms. Boyle, anything you have to add?
Yes, before we get into questions, I wanted to read some of the public comments, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All right.
So, we presented this draft of the Clearwater Greenprint 2.0 to our Environmental Advisory Board last week and received feedback from both board members and members of the public who were there to comment on the item. We also received public comment through an online submission form that was broadcasted through the city's social media channels. So I am going to just summarize some of the major suggestions that we received. First is to reduce citywide emissions 80 to 100% by 2035, rather than the current 80% by 2050 goal. Another is to reduce emissions from city facilities 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. Another suggested including wastewater and water quality monitoring and improvement as a strategy, as well as to report on efforts that the city is already doing in this area. To encourage developers to participate in a green fund, which would operate similarly to the voluntary public art and development fee. And while the current draft does include language that recommends an ocean-friendly policy for city facilities and events, it was recommended that the plan direct the city to consider ordinances against the use of single-use plastics, certain single-use plastics. Positive feedback was also received that expressed gratitude for the progress that the city has made so far and excitement for the reinvigoration of the Clearwater Greenprint plan. And so thank you, and with that, I'm happy to open it up for questions.
Questions from council. Mr. Harn, you want to?
Mayor and council, not a question, but I just wanted to point out that I had met with Leanne a couple of times as she was working on the document. I encouraged them to push us as hard as they felt they could. There were no constraints. So if there are some things in the plan that you raise an eyebrow to, it's because they had no constraints on giving us what I felt would be the best benefit from their work. So I just want to make you all aware of that.
Very good. Councilmember Albritton.
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. I like pushing it up and making better goals for the future. Everybody is involved in this. I mean, it's not just council here and what we do in city buildings, but we have community involvement, and now people are more aware that we need to do things and be more stringent on what we use as far as energy. So I just make a comment. I think that we really ought to put certification on the buildings that we do. Just make that, not go through the certification process, but go ahead and strive on everything we're doing in the public sector, is to do it at a LEED certification goal. But I think it's great. It's a little bit more than was presented to me, and that's good. If we can get the public in on this, it'll be a good thing.
Vice Mayor?
No, thank you. Appreciate all the work. I think this is a great document for us to have, and basically a roadmap as we move forward. But correct me if I'm wrong, we've already converted all of our streetlights to LED, have we not?
So the beauty of the Greenprint Plan update is that we have a number of strategies that are remaining from the original document that just have new information in them. So what we've done is the strategies that have remained, which is all but two, we provide an update in the plan of what the city has done so far. So on that strategy, we do touch on the fact that we've worked with Duke to transfer a majority of our lights over to LED. The remaining part of that strategy is just to continue to working with Duke to identify if there are any remaining.
Other options?
Yeah, going forward.
Okay, and these are all great goals. I think there are people that are think, oh, we should accelerate it, we should be even faster, but everything you try to accelerate, the cost accelerates, and we're always going to have to be cost conscious. I mean, that's our jobs, and but the goals are great. Now, there's no penalty if we don't reach the goal, but that doesn't mean we should take our eye off the target for sure.
And to your point as well, Greenprint, the document itself is to remain a living document, so it is to be continuously updated. So if there is more scientific data, more world events, more available technologies, we can continuously update the plan and modify those goals to meet.
And we now have you to do all that, to keep us
Yes.
abreast of all that. So, yeah.
Councilmember Bunker?
Do you think we can and should be going for the higher goals that people were asking for?
So part of that, I would like to see the discussion that you all have with that. The 80% by 2050 is what's recommended in the original Paris Agreement that the U.S. entered, and what is recommended by the International Panel on Climate Change in their 2016 report. They basically said worldwide we need to see an 80% reduction in emissions to stay below a 2 degrees Celsius increase in global temperature. So that's why we pulled that one. We see previously that the City of St. Pete's ISAP plan had that as a goal. The City of Orlando has that as a goal as well. However, just recently, St. Pete and Orlando, as well as Miami, and there was one other, but I cannot remember, just announced they're doing a Race to Zero campaign, which means they're shifting over to that 0% emissions by 2050, net emissions.
Okay, thank you. I think that sounds like a good goal.
Is there a cost number associated with that?
A cost number, can you elaborate on participation or on?
How much is it going to cost to get to zero?
Yes, so I don't think I have a solid answer for that. For every city it's going to look different, and it depends on the implementations that you take. Because for zero, it's not always like we're going to cut emissions, any emissions that we produce straight down to zero. It can be, we'll offset any emissions.
I understand that, but 100% is pretty aggressive by 2035, if I heard you correctly, is that right?
That was one of the recommendations, yes, from the public, from a member of the public.
Without marrying that to a dollar figure, it's hard to make a decision and say that's our goal. So do we have any idea for Clearwater? Don't care about Orlando or St. Pete.
Based on that goal, we do not, just
Okay.
because it's a comment from the member of the public.
Okay.
The 80% by 2050 is founded in scientific reports. And it also allows us to have a little bit of wiggle room based on that 20% that we would still emit.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is like my favorite topic to talk about, so thank you. And thank you for all the hard work. I wanted to mention Heather Parsons, Sheridan Boyle, and Lauren Matzke, who are staff that worked so hard as well, and the members of the EAB board, as well as the members of the public that came out and spoke a week or so ago. I was out of state, so wasn't here, but watched the meeting, and it was great to see all that energy, and I appreciate all that engagement. One thing I just wanted to mention as far as the presentation that you just gave today was that on the methodology slides, we don't have some of those bulleted methodologies on whatever was attached to our agenda, where you have kind of the gold thing. So if we could have if I could have a list of the methodologies, and you said there's like over 50, or there's probably hundreds if we talk about.
They are in the appendix of the document, and it may be that on yours you have to click next because those orange bubbles don't
Yeah.
pop up.
Yeah.
And if it's a PDF, it probably just saves the face
It's a
of it.
PDF,
Yeah.
it's static.
Okay, great, thanks. And I love the way it's organized, and I love that you have given the current conditions as far as our population, our poverty rate, and our median household income, especially because some of our goals deal with some equity and social justice there. What I think is interesting on the climate policy landscape overview that you talked about, a federal, that allows the federal government to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, this Massachusetts case, and that what I think it helps illustrate is that, at least in Florida, we don't have any guidance from the state as far as setting goals, and we're one of the few states that doesn't do that, or incentivize municipalities or encourage municipalities. So when we go over to climate policy landscape overview, it's pretty telling that the first bullet is the Florida Energy and Climate Commission was dissolved in the state of Florida. And so it's leaving it up to these municipalities to take action and figure out what they're going to do. And so I think that's, an opportunity as well as a challenge for us. And I think, this takes it on, and I think that's great. And I love that you've got the model documents from the state of Florida as well as Atlanta. So that's really good. It's also interesting that those cities have signed on to renewable energy goals, which is encouraging as well. As we move through some of the document, what I wanted to mention too is on our goals page, and this is what some of the public has weighed in on, is that we have only a 1% reduction per year to 2035. Why is that not a higher goal? And then why does it accelerate after 2035? Why can't we,
That's a great
for
question.
city operations here, especially if we are considering or hiring a group like Synergistics that'll come in and help. So we spend over $7 million a year, right, on electricity. And so what are we going to do to reduce that by more than 1% a year?
Mm-hmm. So there's kind of two parts of that conversation. There's the citywide emission reduction goal, which isn't just the city of Clearwater, it's the commercial, industrial, and residential. That one, that 25% reduction by 2035, the reason that's included is an extension to the previous goals of the Greenprint Plan, because that was the final goal of the Greenprint Plan. That's why we included it in here. And then we ramped it up for that 80% by 2050 to meet kind of the goals that's recommended by the scientific global community. Mm-hmm. Now for city facilities, we do have recommendations by our goals of how much we want to reduce citywide facility energy consumption. We do not have specific emission reduction goals just for the city. It would more fall on par for the community as whole, if that makes sense. So if that 80% by 2050 is citywide, we would expect the city's facility emissions to be that, as well as industrial, commercial, and residential. The public comments did acknowledge the fact that we do not have more ambitious goals for the city for emission reductions in its own facility, which one was the comment was, can the city be a leader and more rapidly reduce its own emissions before doing that with the public as well?
And can we? I mean, we
So
could.
it's not currently in the document. But that's what was received as a comment.
And what would it take to get there, to bump it up to 2% per year?
Well, I mean, for the city and just citywide, but for our city facilities, the greatest contributor to our emissions is energy and transportation. Mostly energy because we do, our water and wastewater treatment facilities consume a large amount of water. Water,
Energy.
but energy as well. And those are vital, those are absolutely vital services that we provide, but looking at how we can either offset that with renewable energy or find opportunities elsewhere. Our city facilities themselves are fairly large, so energy is a huge opportunity there, as well as our own fleet transition.
Which is in the process, sort of, right? We're looking at transitioning our fleet, and we have fleet goals here.
We have fleet goals, and we are currently reviewing a green fleet policy and moving it through, hopefully today, our senior executive team.
Okay. And then as we look at, again, the target timelines, I think by 2025, 10% reduction in energy use in city buildings. And we're talking about from 2007 measurement, not from today's measurement.
No, we're not talking about 2007, we're talking about from today.
From today?
Yes, so the
Okay.
emission reduction goals are from the 2007 baseline.
Okay.
But we would be, because our facilities have changed, and we have new facilities and we have facilities that are no longer with us. So it would be to establish that today and then set that metric to decrease it 10% of our consumption.
Of today, okay, that's good clarification. On the target timelines for 2030, we've got, all right, so here's some of the, let me do the easy one here. So I really love the ones we've got on food outlets located within a 15-minute walk of every resident that sell fresh produce, miles of bike lane, 20% reduction in energy costs to low-income residents, and rooftop solar is installed on homes of 1,000 low and moderate income residents. How wonderful is that? What a solid number to put on a dashboard and to really measure that and see how we're doing. So it'll be exciting to see that happen. Part of my notes again on this slide is, what about emissions reduction target for city buildings? Could we have a 50% reduction by 2030 in these city buildings? And why would it only be 20% reduction in energy usage?
So one thing I wanted to point there is we have a 20% reduction in energy usage, right? So that's energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. And then we have 20% of electricity for city facilities coming from renewable energy sources. Yeah. So right there, that's a 40% reduction in our emissions.
Correct.
Because it's a 20% reduction and then 20% renewable energy, which when you tally that is zero on that one.
And following up on that, my question is that renewable energy coming from Duke, or is it coming from solar that'll be on our buildings?
It is both. It's however we can get it.
Okay.
We will be starting to participate in the Duke Clean Energy Connection Program in 2022.
Okay.
That right off the bat doesn't start giving us all the energy that we enrolled in, which is 40%. Mm-hmm. But we do expect by, I believe, 7 years after the start of the program to start seeing that kick in.
Okay, great. Good to know that it's from both. On the next slide, that's 2050 on targeted timelines. 90% of existing municipal buildings complete energy efficiency improvements in accordance with recommissioning plan and energy policy requirements. This seems pretty long range. Could this be moved up a little bit? Just seems like, but I guess it takes a lot of time to go through all. I've asked for, and it's in the process of getting a list of all of our city buildings, and retrofitting things and doing things like that, I guess, takes time.
Yeah, I think we put it in the 2050 just to allow for that wiggle room. I don't see a glaring reason why we might not be able to move it to 2030. There is that 20-year difference there, though. And really, that's just because both of those policies have not yet been established. Of course, we do have plans for our own facilities to upgrade them and improve them, but the strategy included in this energy section is to have a more formalized recommissioning plan that has specific targets and inclusions in these buildings. So without these two policies yet being created and then instituted, I think that's why it moved to the latter.
And then, under the strategies, I had a question on short-term, what short-term meant, but short-term is 2025, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it will be completed by 2025, but it means it will be started.
Okay, okay. Oh, well, under water conservation, I had under green space expansion, I wanted just a few more details, but I see that you've got that on that appendix, so that's fine. Under the water conservation strategies, I reached out to Maya Burke with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program because I'm on that board, and just asked her to take a look at this and see if there's anything we could incorporate from the viewpoint of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. And so it's simply about like water conservation at the tap here and, you know, your washing machine or your toilet or dishwasher, things like that, where it's not, where Maya said, you know, we have some strategies that deal with habitat restoration, mangroves, and water quality. Is Greenprint, do you see that as not the place for that, or can we add those things?
So I see that more in our livability section, where we're talking about green space expansion. Certainly mangrove habitats, even though they're, you know, both water and land, I would include that in our green space. And then we do also have a strategy of like environmental conservation, as well as Leanne mentioned that working for that 3 Ps, that public-private partnership to identify properties that can be converted and preserved as green space. So I think that is where it would probably sit with the plan, and I do think the plan calls that out, maybe not to the same extent. And I do want to mention too that the Greenprint plan is a sustainability plan, but its main goals is greenhouse gas reductions. So while topics like water quality are absolutely important, and we need to make sure, you know, that we're reporting on all the good that the city is doing, water quality doesn't really touch on greenhouse gas reductions. Potable water does, because we use an enormous amount of electricity to both process and treat water. So that's why water conservation is mostly called out in the plan rather than water quality, because of that direct tie to emissions.
Okay. But there's like blue carbon capture is what she's termed it, where if we have those mangroves and other seagrass and things like that, that'll help us reduce our, so, okay. So what would you suggest I do with her suggestions here? Do you want me to advocate to put them in the livability section, or should we include them at all, or how do you think we should?
So if you would like to advocate, that's fine. We can put that in the green space expansion section, and I do think right now we have two strategies that are relevant to that, the green space expansion, and then we do have an urban tree canopy strategy. Now, granted, that doesn't relate to mangroves, but we could include some lines in there that has provisions for expanding the amount of mangroves that the city has along its shores.
Okay. And part of that was inactive shoreline and things like that. So, and those are articulated in our Tampa Bay Estuary Program agreement as well. We have specific goals for Clearwater. So if we could maybe include those, just so that we're advocating for the same goals with 2 different documents, we're you know, kind of working together there. Okay. I think that's what I have so far. Thank you. It was a fantastic document, really, a really nice job.
Thank you.
Ms. Boyle, thank you for all the work that you put into this. Ms. Ploss, few questions. Going back to page 9, which is where the different emissions are coming from. It looks like, obviously, transportation continues to grow all the way through 2048. Pinellas County is built out. Clearwater is pretty much built out too. And we see people converting over to electric vehicles. A lot of people are using alternative transportation. I'm assuming rideshare is going to continue to grow. Why does this expand the emissions?
Yes, that's a great question. So in that graph, the only thing that has changed is we're accounting for Duke Energy's renewable energy increase. But that does not include the projections for a few things. Electric vehicle expansion. So right now, the current projection is that by 2050, at least half of all passenger vehicles on the road will be electric. That will have significant reductions. But what that graph shows is for transportation, based on the rate of change that we've seen so far from 2018 to 2007, and not considering any other factor, that's what we would look at. And it's, when I broke it down, I was wondering why. Is it because of population increase, or is it because we're just driving more? And even per person, despite a slight increase in our population, it is because we're driving more per person, compared from 2018 to 2007. So it does not take into account all those multiple factors where we would expand or expect the rate increase of rideshare or electric vehicles and so on.
I didn't see anything in the document where we're trying to create more jobs in Clearwater so people don't need to travel as far.
I think the...
Am I missing that?
I don't know if we explicitly said like creating jobs in Clearwater, but that green economy section does really focus on more like plugging people into job opportunities within Clearwater that have a green profile in them, as well as highlighting businesses that are making those shifts. But I think it's not stated, but expectation is that the increase in renewable energy industries will also increase in jobs.
Okay, and then on page 12, you talk about the city of Atlanta and Largo and Orlando and St. Pete, and I understand they're certainly closer in the southeast or in our region. Are there better plans around the country? Are there, standards somewhere that they're really leaders? Why just regionally, I guess?
So
Why not best practices nationwide?
yes, I'll hand it over to Leanne to answer after that, but I would say for the southeast, we look at it because we face similar effects and conditions. So when it's looking at what renewable energy is accessible to us, or what do we need to consider in terms of what the future will look like, the southeast will have a very different future, projected future, than the northeast and the northwest and so on. But I don't know, do you have any understanding of national plans and if this is on par?
I can speak a little bit about that. So the state of Florida is very unique. The southeast region is very unique, both from the way that we source our energy, in addition to the way that we regulate or monitor or require reporting for climate change. So keeping it in the southeast region is most advantageous and from an implementation standpoint. When you start to bring in plans from New York, I think it was one NYC, or plans from the West Coast, it starts to get a little bit irrelevant. And then the core components of it, they're common to plans that are already in the southeast region. So it just made more sense to just keep it at home. So that's the basis for that.
So is that because in the southeast, for the most part, we're not using coal?
No, by no means is that's not necessarily the case. It's more the way that we regulate our energy. So in the Northeast, for example, they have distributed generation. There's competition for energy providers. Here, we basically have an energy monopoly.
Monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that becomes very complicated to incorporate policies from all over the states.
How much have you worked with our planning department? Because, in some ways, density is a dirty word in Florida. But it really can help with mass transit corridors and also creating places where we always talk about live, work, play, but we don't create many places where you can live, work, play and not get in your car. So how much did you coordinate with Ms. Clayton and the planning department?
So the original Green Print plan, which I want to say the update, while it provides a few new strategies and some new goals, it stays very true to its core. The original Green Print plan was very much founded in our planning department. And so the insights that they had there, we also, I coordinated to figure out what has happened on some of these strategies so far with our planning department. It's now called our Livability section. Thankfully, there has been a lot of progress made in that area, like our complete streets policy and really prioritizing mixed-use development. So I would say, the document itself very much is still rooted in those original goals, and that livability section has really been owned and instituted by our planning department.
What do urban agricultural centers look like?
I love that question. So it can be,
Well, thanks.
yeah, it can be city specific, it can be location specific. So urban agriculture, it could look like a urban farm. It could also look like a community garden. It could look like a restaurant that has a section of its property where it grows its own food that it then puts into its meals. So really, it can be location specific, and we could have the opportunity to define what that means for Clearwater. I think, and the thought escapes me now too, but with urban agriculture, a lot of that is also going to be rooted in our community. So one of the first strategies in that section is to create an urban agriculture task force, which we have a number of community members that are already really like heavily plugged into that realm, where they would be able to tell us what that looks like and then identify the areas across Clearwater that could be a great opportunity.
So in other words, there's not a critical mass or a size. You can really go from very small to
Yes.
significant.
And we would definitely want to do that being a built-out community.
Okay. I love some of the goals for biking and other things, but Florida's tough. I mean, I only live 12 blocks from my house. At one point, I looked at getting a Segway, but you got to deal with heat and rain and everything else. Can you help me with how we get there? You know, some people have to bike, they don't have a choice.
Yeah, I don't think it's only just the environmental conditions. I think it's also the structural conditions. I know that traffic and safety is probably the largest concern for anyone trying to bike anywhere. So really, that's a blend between our transportation goals and our livability. So really making, restructuring our streets so that they accommodate multiple modes of transportation and aren't so car-heavy focused. But then also, when we have the opportunity to redevelop, having that mixed use in mind where people aren't having to make as large of trips so that they might be able to consider going on their bike.
I mean, we've all been living through COVID and we've seen a lot more telecommuting and everything else. I've talked to some corporate people that think they've lost productivity. How much is that incorporated into the plan?
So the plan right now just calls for a policy, but we would be able to define what that policy looks like. We might be able to identify just key roles within the city. A lot of this would come down to HR and their recommendations.
And it's
But-
just for us.
Yes, just for us. This is not citywide.
Right.
To identify the positions that even, that would be a possibility, and say it's not 100% telecommuting, but a few days a week or a more flexible schedule to allow that. So we would really have the ability to define what that looks like for us as a city.
Okay. So then on Thursday, we're going to have another presentation, allow the public obviously to speak, and then your hope is that we're going to pass a resolution.
Yes, and I will lead the presentation on Thursday.
Okay. Mr. Horn, did you have something to add?
Yes, I have 3 comments to make, so can I make them now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the first one is, and this relates to some of the previous comments that were made, when you experience the drought that we did in 2005, we learned that water conservation is very real. It really does matter. So I like the fact that we've highlighted that because the city actually came together and we literally reduced water conservation. So while there are other aspects to it, this one is very important because climate certainly will have an impact on water conservation. And it was helpful to see people not do things with potable water that we felt were not supportive of that overall goal. The second thing is, if you recall, I've always said, we can do anything that council policy mandates. So while on the one hand, you ask staff, well, what's our recommendation? Keep in mind that what's also related to that is that if you believe something ought to be more aggressive, we need to do something, then you need to be prepared to discuss among yourselves and create a policy that pushes us maybe even further than we want to go.
And then we have to find the money.
Well, that's right. I mean, again, it's a partnership, just like it is a partnership with our community, facility management. I know the first time that it was suggested that I put my home thermometer on or
Your
my
thermostat on
thermostat,
78?
you know, on 78 degrees, you know, I had a heart attack. So when we think about city facilities, not only are we have facilities where employees work and perform their duties, we also have the public that comes in and uses our facility as well. So it's that partnership that really we have to continue to emphasize as we pursue the more aggressive goals that really affect, you know, livability, comfortability, those kinds of things. That's it.
One last thing, there was a pretty alarming article yesterday in the Times about recycling and how a lot of the cities in the state are abandoning it because there's not a market to sell, and the energy used to actually gather all the recyclables, and unfortunately, what a poor job we do in knowing what is recyclable and what is not. And this may not be a question for you, but I've got the right gentleman here. I don't know if anyone has a comment on that.
Before Earl comes up, I did want to mention in the document itself, previously the strategy said recycling program expansion. Solid Waste did that after 2011. And now we've changed that strategy to say recycling program, and it focuses on quality versus quantity. So we're not, the two strategies that we removed was a pay-as-you-throw program because the city shifted to a once-a-week collection and a single-stream recycling program. And then the other strategy that we removed is the original green print suggested a commercial mandate for commercial recycling. So requiring businesses to recycle, with which the state of the market as it is now is not feasible for us. And we're really focusing on preserving the integrity of our commercial and residential recycling programs that do exist. Earl?
Mr. Gloucester?
So, good morning, Earl Gloucester, Director of Solid Waste General Services. I hadn't read the article in completion in its entirety. I just was made aware of it this morning. But to hear what you said about communities that are abandoning recycling, I would say that they're going to reverse course within the next year or two because the markets are coming back for recycling commodities. The past month, we just went from negative to a positive for the recycling that we're sending over to Waste Management in Ybor City. We had not been in a positive with them for the previous 2 years, I think. So the markets are starting to turn. We're making adjustments nationwide from where we previously were shipping everything to China and they turned us off a couple of years ago due to high contamination rates. So mills are starting to be built back here in the United States. So our product is being used here. The commodity is being used here. Our recyclables are going to be used here. There's a plan to build a paper cardboard plant in the West Shore District. So that'll be phenomenal for this entire region, not to have to ship it to Georgia or Alabama. So I would say that anybody that's gotten out of the business, they're going to reverse course within the next couple of years because it's going to be to the positive to the point where they see it as being advantageous.
Okay. Any other questions? Vice Mayor?
No, again, the only 2 points I want to make is, number one, all these things, it's very easy for, a citizen to say, why can't we accelerate? And everybody sitting up here and in this room, everybody I know would love to accelerate. The problem is there is an economic factor to every one of those components. The other one is, and Councilmember Beckman alluded to, the Energy and Climate Commission that Florida had being dissolved, but the commission, my recollection on it is, the commission was established to create the framework for the state's climate policy and whatnot. And once it did that, and it says right here, the functions were transferred to the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So it got moved. So Nikki Fried's office is in charge of implementation and coordination and execution. So if we have problems, that's where we need to be talking. So it's not that the state doesn't have a focus on it. It's the commission did what it was supposed to do, and then the state moved it to where they thought it was would be the best place to implement and move forward. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Councilmember Beckman.
Well, just to follow up on that, the state and the legislature has not, governor and legislature has not set any kind of goals or incentives or made that kind of a priority, though it is in her office now. But and to the point that there are economic factors, there's an economic factor to these components. One of the things we'll talk about tomorrow when we talk about the budget is advocating for an energy manager to help us realize these savings that will help pay for some of these initiatives and start a green fund. And there are all sorts of ways to look at it that way as well. Also, Duke in Florida is burning coal, correct? They have a whole stash of coal that was low price that they're continuing to burn. So we burn coal in this region, although they are doing some good things with some renewable energy solar fields, but they continue to burn coal because it was low priced and they've got a stash of it that they're continuing to burn for a number of years. Mentioning Clearwater is a great place to live, work, and play, and we talked about transportation being a big part of emissions. One thing that I've learned is that, and these are all like these puzzle pieces that fit together from my point of view up here with strategic plan, comprehensive plan, our Parks and Rec strategic plan, things like that, is that we have some, kind of philosophy that we're phasing out pocket parks where people can just walk to a local park and go on a swing and sit on a bench and pull the stroller or the wagon there, in favor of more destination parks where you drive, you bundle up the kids, you drive and park. And so as we adopt these goals with Greenprint, where we want to encourage people to get out and use multimodal and walk, I hope that we consider those when we move forward with our other strategic plans. And when we talk about urban agriculture too, one thing I think would be creative, and again, there's all sorts of those methodologies you've got, is where Sheridan had the rain barrel initiative, we could easily have kind of a raised bed garden kind of initiative so that people could put those in their yards as well, because we're so densely populated. So I just wanted to add those things in. Oh, and one last thing about planning department and community gardenings and flexibility. And so there have been a couple of people, including the people on the North Beach, who have talked about having a community garden. They have a small triangle part of city land, and different people have said, how come our rec center doesn't have a community garden next to it, and all that stuff. And so I've learned that it's not zoned for this open space recreational community gardening. And what kind of a message would it send if we could allow gardens, and however we define them, community gardens or smaller gardens or whatever, however we define gardening, in every square foot of Clearwater, and it would be up to the proponent of the gardens to come up to the council and advocate for it here for this reason, and then there'd be a body that would vote on that. But I'm thinking, even down Hercules, where we have light industrial, what if somebody, what if Herod had built their light industrial out there and they wanted to allocate a small part for a garden for their employees to garden before or after work? I mean, would that be allowed? I think that would be a great, thing. So anyway, it's just thinking outside of the box and really having our policy reflect these values is exciting as we go forward.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. Item 4.1.
Appoint interim city manager and set interim salary. Ms. Poirier.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Morning.
Jennifer Poirier, Human Resources Director. As you're aware, after nearly 23 years here at the city, Mr. Harn is retiring as city manager. And we do have Baker Tilly that is currently engaged in recruiting for the city manager position. However, that is not expected to be filled until mid-October, and Mr. Harn's retiring in early September. So as such, the council is going to need to appoint an interim city manager and set the salary. In addition, HR staff will work with the city attorney to have an employment agreement letter, should it be an internal candidate, to make sure that those conditions are contained as to what all that includes, the time frame, which would be until council makes a decision otherwise, or until the city manager comes on board, and also would allow for that person to go back, revert to their previous position.
Well, my assumption that it was going to be Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Delk isn't here, so he loses. Must be present to win. Do you have a recommendation on salary?
So what we do typically for interim positions at the executive level is anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on the position. So anything in between that would be normal. Also looking around at what other jurisdictions have done, that would also be normal as well. So something in between that range.
Well, I think the responsibilities are certainly, would require the 20.
Sure.
And I would be comfortable with Mr. Maxwell being the interim until we get a new city manager. I'm not using the replacement word anymore for Mr. Harn, because I don't think we can replace him, but hopefully we'll find somebody great. This will be something good for Mr. Maxwell's experience too, right? So is everyone comfortable with that?
I agree, totally.
Are you amenable to that?
I am amenable.
All right, outstanding. All right, 4.2.
Mayor, may I place the item on consent?
You may.
Approve Juneteenth as a city-recognized holiday. Mr. Sherman Stroman, he is our new Diversity and Equity Manager. This is his first presentation, and it is customary for me to say, be nice to him.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I come before you once again to advocate for Juneteenth. I stand before you as a walking affirmation of what this holiday means. Juneteenth is a celebration honoring the end of slavery in the United States. The holiday represents the true emancipation of freedom. And that value of freedom is valued in our American value for all, as we speak it in our pledge. On June 17th, 2021, Juneteenth was officially made a holiday by the federal government. The city of Clearwater has diversity and equity and inclusion at its core, and has had that at its core for decades. And staff will continue to make significant and intentional progress towards making a more inclusive and equitable workforce for all our employees. Such staff is recommending, beginning in June 2020, the City of Clearwater formally acknowledges June 10th as an official annual City of Clearwater holiday. Staff invites the community at large to embrace it alongside of us. The City of Clearwater currently provides 10 paid holidays and 3 floating holidays for CWA and SAMP employees. FOP and IAFF union employees receive 9 paid holidays and 4 floating holidays. The city's comparable municipalities are all currently in discussions regarding adding Juneteenth as an official holiday, with one, the City of Clearwater, already having approved Juneteenth as an official holiday for the city. Any changes to the holiday schedule would need to be negotiated with each of the bargaining units. Now, appropriations and amounts. Staff has reviewed the cost of providing a paid holiday for all permanent employees based on the current salaries and typical holiday hours worked. Juneteenth is expected to add approximately $154,000 in compensation and $22,000 in related benefits for a total of $176,000. Of this amount, approximately $133,000 would be paid from the general fund. Within a typical salary and benefit cost, approximately $318,000 expect to be paid as holiday leave in lieu of hours worked. And future budgets would include the Juneteenth holiday. So,
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman.
I have a question about that line you just read where we've got, there's a total of 176,000. Of this amount, approximately 133 would be paid from the general fund. Where's the balance come from?
That comes from the enterprise funds.
Enterprise funds?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't have a problem with approving Juneteenth as our paid holiday, but I would hope that we could use it as a way to educate and inform and celebrate and do something more than we have in the past as far as acknowledging Juneteenth in June. In the previous years that I've been aware, there hasn't been a whole lot of fanfare or information about it. So I hope we could use that as a stepping off point to really engage our city workers as well as the city as a whole into what it means and why it is important that it is a federal holiday.
Absolutely.
Consent?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
5.1.
Authorize a purchase order to Keystone Excavators, Inc. of Oldsmar, Florida for renovations of Belmont Park located at 1535 South Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue for a guaranteed maximum price of $395,875.98 pursuant to RFQ 40-20, Construction Manager at Risk Services, continuing contracts, transfer $150,000 from CIP at Wright Park renovations, Belmont Park renovations, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Hallios.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jim Hallios, Director of Parks and Recreation. The item that we have before you today is for site work to be done at the Belmont Park. Staff has worked closely with Lake Bellevue Neighborhood Association, our Planning and Development Department, and our neighborhood coordinator to renovate the park and get the public's feedback for items that they'd like to see in the park. This proposal from our CMR will do site work for the project, includes construction of stormwater improvements, a basketball half court, sidewalks, parking lot improvements, and grading of a new multi-purpose playfield. And then the remaining work that needs to be completed will be sodding, irrigation system, landscaping, fencing, and park amenities. And I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this item.
Any questions for Mr. Hallios? Looks like a great project. Councilmember Beckman.
Are we using any Ed Wright Park funds for Belmont Park?
Yes, we transferred $150,000 from Ed Wright Park renovations into this project. The reasoning behind that is because of these two parks are in close proximity and they both serve the same neighborhood. And again, we'll be meeting actually tomorrow night with the Lake Bellevue community to discuss some renovations to Ed Wright Park, so we're not really sure what the scope of that will be as of yet either.
Okay. And then is the $357,000 for the entire renovations or just the infrastructure?
Just the infrastructure. So that's what we're looking at for that. Then the extra $150,000 will be for the sodding, the fencing, the landscaping, and the park amenities. This has went up substantially with all construction projects. Initially, we thought we would be able to get under that $395,000 price, but as this project has moved forward, it's kind of lagged in time, and so we've suffered from that lag as far as a price increase, much like we've done with a lot of projects in the city.
Okay. And so my question was after December, so the target timeline is finished by December. So after December, you won't come needing more funds for picnic tables and swings and all that?
No, that's included in the $150,000, and actually December is when the CMR is going to be done with the site work, so we'll still need to go back in there and do our project work as far as putting down sod, irrigation, things of that nature. So December may be an overly ambitious time frame as far as a complete project, but that's when we hope to have the CMR out of there, and then we can kind of follow up as necessary and complete those other pending items.
So complete like early next year?
I'd imagine so.
Okay. And then I just had a couple of questions on the contract. It was, there's like and I just to understand a little bit, there is a mobilization and demobilization includes video recording of existing site conditions and a flash drive provided to the owner, us, of existing conditions prior to beginning construction. Is like almost 25, well, it's 24,500. Mobilization and demobilization, what does that mean? And then a video of the whole site thing? Does that mean demolishing things?
No, the mobilization would actually be getting out there, fencing off certain items within the park and getting their equipment out there and basically getting the staff and the run-up and actually setting it up as a construction project site to make sure it meets all of our standards and requirements as it comes to insurance, so that when you will go around a park and you see items fenced off, like take for example Crest Lake, all of the work that we had to do there before we actually started in preparation, that's what you're looking at. So that mobilization, demobilization, and then the pictures are just a progress to kind of show before and after and how we're going along. So that's what, it's not as simple as just them showing up and that's what the fee is. It's more so getting the site ready to be have construction and then leave afterwards and make sure it's safe.
Okay, because I saw that 24,000, and then there's articulation of wrapping all these trees. So there's like 800 and some trees in that area that are going to be wrapped. So that's a line item expense as well. So that demobilization must not include the tree business.
That's correct. The tree barriers are usually separate from the overall demobilization. That's more so just getting equipment and staff out there and getting the site secured. And again, when we have to secure trees, that's an additional cost because that's usually not included in that flat upfront pricing.
And then one other tiny little thing, but it's like on line item 34, it says owner provided trash receptacles and liner to be installed by CMAR, hardware provided by the owner, 6 of them. It's like $1,200, $1,300. Are they going to pour some pad and secure them? Because it sounds like somebody's just putting 6 trash cans out there.
Yeah, they're going to have to pour a concrete pad, and then that's how we put in our receptacles and benches, anything within the park. Especially when we're redoing a park like that, we like to have it so it can be secured down to the ground. So that is preparing the site work in that area to be able to put our equipment that we have in there, our amenities.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Consent?
Yep.
5.2.
Approve a sovereignty submerged lands lease renewal agreement number 5200100893 between the City of Clearwater and Board of Trustees of the Internal Improvement Trust Fund of the State of Florida from April 1, 2021 through April 1, 2026 for the use of submerged land for Pier 60 and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Helios again.
Yes, Jim Halios again, Mayor Council. This item before you is for our 5-year lease with the State of Florida for a submerged land lease underneath the pier. The cost of that lease is there's an annual rental fee of $5,280, and then we provide the state with 6% of our gross sales from the bait shop, which traditionally is around $100,000 based on post-COVID or pre-COVID figures before we had those issues. Again, bringing this to you a couple months behind, so we apologize for that. Just with COVID and staff turnover, this is one of those that kind of slipped through the cracks that we caught, and we're okay with the state to submit this should you approve it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman.
Just wanted to know why we changed the contact department from Marine Aviation to Parks and Rec.
That was done several years ago. The Pier 60 as well as the Clearwater Sailing Center was transitioned over to Parks and Recreation. So we have management of that contract of both those facilities. So in order to keep in line, we collect the monies for the bait house. So this is the best kind of line of demarcation to make sure that we're accounting for it properly instead of having to pass it through another department that's really not dealing with the day-to-day operation of it.
Consent?
Yes.
5.3.
Authorize a purchase order to Himes Electric Company, Inc. of Lutz, Florida for the renovation of the lighting system on the northeast multipurpose field at Countryside Sports Complex in an amount not to exceed $327,093.80 pursuant to invitation to bid, Countryside Sports Complex Field Lighting Phase 3, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Lockwood.
Morning, Mayor, Council. Mike Lockwood, Assistant Director for the Parks and Recreation Department. In front of you this morning is a contract with Himes Electric Company, Inc. in the amount of $327,093.60. This contract is needed to complete the next phase of the lighting project at Countryside Sports Complex, which will allow us to enlarge the playing surface there. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lockwood? Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, we've had some issues with other lighting in sports complex with neighbors. Is this expansion, do you anticipate any problems with light overflow into neighborhoods?
This will actually be more direct to the actual, the lighting field itself, so no. And there's the neighbors, this is the northeast complex, so there's no housing around that area. It's right next to McMullen.
Okay,
So no,
thanks.
sir.
Other questions? Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
5.4,
Approve an amendment to the sponsorship agreement between ESPN Productions, Inc. and the City of Clearwater to host the third year of the agreement in February 2022 rather than 2021, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Lockwood again.
Morning again, Mike Lockwood, Assistant Director for the Parks and Recreation Department. In front of you this morning is an amendment to the sponsorship agreement that we have with ESPN Production, Inc. The 2021 event was canceled due to COVID travel restrictions. So this amendment will allow us to fulfill the 3-year contract in February of 2022.
questions? What are we anticipating after this 3-year contract? Are we,
We're working with the county now, and we're in hopes that we will extend this agreement with ESPN. I mean, all conversations that we've had so far have been very positive. So we anticipate that this contract will be even longer, but that'll be something that we're talking to them about now. But I know the county is on board with extending it as well, which is a big part of it because of the monies that are needed
Right.
to fulfill this.
no, I know from the TDC's
Yes, sir.
perspective, but, I mean, this is a really good event.
Yes.
Brings a lot of notoriety, it brings a lot of tourists.
Absolutely.
So it's something I hope, we can continue.
Yes.
Are there any improvements to the facility that need to be made, or is there ever any complaints?
Right now,
I know parking's an issue.
Yeah, no, space is the biggest, kind of concern, but, we max out the area that, we build out. So right now, they are happy. Every year, we learn more and more about the flows of traffic. So right now, the facility itself, we are, just because of COVID, ESPN is doing things differently as well. So it's a lot of their things that they weren't doing prior to COVID, they're learning more about, where some of their commentators aren't necessarily needing to be on site. So a lot of those change the way we can do things. So we're even looking at potentially using 1 through 4 rather than 8 and 9, and 8 and 9 would be more specific to TV games, so we can kind of move things around a little bit easier. But we are working through that. They'll be here in a couple weeks where we'll start talking about those mechanics.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, and we've got a huge advocate for this event in Michelle Smith. She's referred to as the Babe Ruth of women's softball, and she lives right here in Pinellas County, and I work with her on the Clearwater for Youth board, and she does the announcing for ESPN for women's softball, and she's a huge advocate for it, and she's very confident that ESPN's going to want to keep it here for quite some time, so.
Good to hear.
Yep.
Consent?
Yes.
5.5,
Discuss RFP for naming rights and valuation consultant. Mr. Halios.
Morning again, Mayor, Council, Jim Halios, Director of Parks and Recreation. This item we have before you is related to the naming rights consultant valuation RFP that we're looking to take out. Prior to bringing this forward, the Assistant City Manager, Michael Delk, and I had a discussion, and we really wanted to get your feedback and to gauge your comfort level on what we were asking for in the RFP before we go forward. So that's what we're here today is there's an attachment on there that has some of the items that we were looking at through myself and then the purchasing department. We've done some research from other municipalities that have done similar RFPs, and that was kind of the meat and potatoes of what was asked. So I'd be happy to answer any questions and get some guidance. Thank you.
any questions for Mr. Halios? I think one of the things we have to think about, and it really will come most likely after we have a consultant, but is kind of the philosophy on the process of what we want down there. Are there any charter issues that are going to be of concern?
No, so there are no charter issues as opposed to drinking, leasing, or otherwise.
Okay, and then Ms. Clayton, signage and recognition. I mean, if we start putting the, Baycare amphitheater or the, Pinch a Penny playground or some of those things, what what are the ramifications of that?
I think I'd like to work with legal to determine if any of those could be considered related to government signage, since it is in our park. So that would be the first thing that I'd want to do, and if not, then I think if that's your pleasure to pursue that, then we would need to think about some sign code amendments. But we'll work with legal first and then let you know what's the best course.
I mean, I think there's a wonderful opportunity, but philosophically, I think we need to decide how comfortable everyone is to slap, names on everything. It will certainly reduce the cost for the city, but it can change the flavor. And are they ongoing or one-time, individuals versus corporate? Those are very different animals. So, Councilmember Albritton and then Beckman.
Yeah, I would think that we don't need to invent the wheel every time we talk about things. I mean, what I would do is see what other municipalities and cities have done with theirs and see if we can kind of see if that's something we can pick up and do ourselves.
Well, the consultant's going to have a good idea of what's been seen in other jurisdictions. So, Councilmember Beckman?
Well, I had, if this is just, you just want feedback on should we hire a consultant or what the consultant will look at?
Well, I think it'd be a little bit of both. I just, Assistant City Manager Delk and I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with the path that we were taking. So, providing feedback on kind of what we're looking for. But one of my main questions is and I think we're going to have to address it eventually, is speaking to what the mayor said, is when we sell these naming rights valuations, is it a one-time deal, or if it's multiple years, then how are we going to manage that portfolio? Who sells the items? So and I think, as the mayor stated, once we get these RFPs back, we'll be able to judge that, and then we can make cost valuations, whether it's worth it to have that or not, or if it's something that's done in-house.
Well, I just did a little bit of research on what some other cities are doing, and there's some significant parks out in San Diego. I've been in a couple of San Diego parks, but, would we pay a consultant on a contingency basis? If we have someone that's going to manage selling those rights, would the money go to a special fund that's designated for just like things that go on in the park? Would the money maybe go to our conservancy? Because part of the information I read was that it seems like people would be less likely to buy naming rights if the money just goes to general funds. They want naming rights that are going to stay with something that's going to go help support that park. Probably, at least this was part of the article that I read. And so we'd have to decide, where does the money go from naming rights? What pool of money does it go into? And part of their argument was they found that donors don't want their money just going to general funds. They want it to stay in the park, which makes sense, right? If you're going to name something, you're kind of invested in that park. One of the questions we'd have to ask is how could we avoid staff time to manage this? One of the things the San Diego thing had was that how long would the name last? What if a park amenity has already been named? Can you rename it? I think they had restrictions on no alcohol, tobacco, or religious organizations could be naming any of their amenities in their park. What are the different price points? Can you have, things like bricks that are at a lower price point and things that are higher? Will a namer be able to choose how the funds are allocated? So, there's, what if someone is interested in naming something forever in perpetuity? And so, anyway, it's really kind of an interesting,
yes,
it's complex and interesting.
Well, those were the points I brought up.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be corporate or individuals. Individuals tend to want in perpetuity. Corporations are accustomed to a time frame, which you see, for instance, out at the ballpark. We've had Bright House, Spectrum, and now Baycare. And that's for a contractual period of time. Same thing with Raymond James. But if you look at something like the Bill Hammer Capitol Theater, that's in perpetuity. And that's the difference really between individuals and corporations. What I would say, and I think, first of all, we need the consultant. I see you, Vice Mayor.
Oh, no.
Is that there will be a whole inventory from very expensive items down to something that almost anybody can participate in. Usually, the money goes towards reducing capital costs in
For that
most
park.
instances,
Mhm.
for the park
Yes.
itself, which is kind of what I envision. But having done this before at other institutions, what I would also recommend is you take a portion that goes into capital and then a portion that goes into a designated fund that helps maintain the facility that you're talking about. Because it's easy to raise capital dollars oftentimes, but you want to make sure that that building or park or playground or whatever else is being maintained at a reasonable level. And some of the schools that are doing this now, they ask for 70% to go towards capital and 30% to go into a perpetual fund that will help maintain, which I think is a very good model, and will keep the quality up. Vice Mayor?
I don't really need to have my hand up anymore because you basically hit what I was going to say. I always intended on any naming rights or money coming in would stay in that park. I mean, that's what it's for. And be it maintenance, capital, for future improvements and things of that nature. So, no, I agree with that completely.
Go forth.
Okay, thank you.
6.1.
Provide direction to determine if the city will exercise its right of first refusal to purchase non-city-owned condominium units as described as PUG, PUA, PUC, RUB of that certain commercial condominium commonly defined as North Beach Plaza condominium located at 490 Poinsett Avenue, Clearwater, Florida, collectively the property. Mr. Mahoney.
Morning, Council. Tom Mahoney, Engineering Department. On June 22nd, 2021, the city received notice that PV Pelican Walk LLC, owners of the non-city-owned portion of the North Beach parking garage and the commercial units along Mandalay, had received an offer to purchase the property for $20,500,000. The city may exercise its right of first refusal to purchase that portion of the privately owned property under the agreement by matching the price and all of the details and terms. The city has 45 days from the receipt of the notice to exercise these rights and provide written notice to PV Pelican Walk LLC. Along with the required deposit, the 45-day period ends on August 6th this year. The closing would then be 30 days thereafter, and if the city does not provide written notice to exercise the offer by August 6th of 2021, then the city's right of first refusal will be waived and the sale of prospective purchase would proceed accordingly. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Team Mahoney, has this happened before?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Once or twice.
Not while I've been back. I mean, Pam, do we really have the time to do a normal due diligence process?
Well, we really don't have the time to do normal due diligence, but our rights under the agreement is to step into the position of the current agreement. So we can exercise under the current terms of the contract that's out there. It's really not a negotiation at all. Either we assume it, we exercise the right of first refusal, or we don't. Now, Ms. Mahoney has,
Yes.
may have something to add to that. She's taken a look at this in much more detail.
Partially based on your declaration of surplus of the other portion of the building, implying that you would probably not want to go forward with a purchase of the subject property for $20,500,000. I just ran some numbers as opposed to ordering a couple of appraisals that would have been in the thousands of dollars. The property appraiser's just market value for the property we're talking about. He has it at $6,460,000, and we know that that runs a little bit below true market value. So if you calculate it at 1.15, you add in 15% on top of that, you're looking at $7,429,000. So they're paying a lot of money for what you would be getting if you were to exercise your option.
Significant premium, okay.
Right.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I kind of break this down into two things. And first, Tom and Laura, y'all must have just enthralling dinner conversations.
It never ends.
But now this breaks down into two things. You know, I really see the facility, the parking garage, and the retail that's associated with it to be quote unquote profitable. You need to own the whole thing. Now, for us to own the whole thing, we, number one, have to not sell what we're agreeing to sell, and we have to come up with $20 million to buy the rest of it. Now, whether or not you can turn a profit at all that money, I don't know. The other way I look at it is, by the construction of that facility, we have addressed a certain level of the parking needs for out on the beach. We can now get $12 million in return and use that $12 million towards addressing other parking needs within the city of Clearwater. So to me, this is an easy decision. We don't need to buy it, and we need to just keep going where we're headed.
12 and a half.
12 and a half.
I would agree with you. So, other questions? All right, we'll discuss that further on Thursday. Thank you both. 6.2.
Approve the amended and restated interlocal agreement between the City of Clearwater and the Tampa Bay Estuary Program and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kessler.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. My name is Sarah Kessler. I'm the lead environmental specialist in the engineering department. I am also a member of the management board of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. I bring before you an update to the Tampa Bay Estuaries interlocal agreement. This update is limited to revised political boundaries and population and some updates in a specific political language. Because Clearwater's population has not increased at the rate of some of the other member municipalities like Tampa, Hillsborough County, Manatee County, the city's annual financial commitment has reduced slightly. So this year's contribution will be right around $21,760, but with the updated agreement, next year's contribution will be right around $19,000. And then the annual increase will be 2.5% until 2026 when they update the agreement again. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Kessler? Councilmember Beckman.
On the document, Sarah, there were these edits. Did our city do those edits that were colored?
No, those edits are from the estuary.
Okay.
So those are just the edits from what the old agreement was to the new one. So you can see that overall, what the purpose of the agreement is hasn't changed. It's just been little monetary things and different political things.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Consent?
Yep.
6.3.
Approve the conveyance of 20 feet by 30 feet easement to Florida Gas Transmission Company, LLC, for the purpose of constructing and maintaining above ground and surface natural gas pipelines, valves, and appurtenances at 3055 North McMullen Booth Road, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Mahoney again.
Tom Mahoney, it's Engineering Department. The location of this easement is on the east side of McMullen Booth Road, just north of State Road 580. The easement will be for the installation and maintenance of a natural gas valve on an existing line and its accompanying infrastructure. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Mahoney?
No.
Consent?
Yes.
6.4.
Approved parking consultant of record professional services agreements as listed to provide continuing professional parking consultant services for a 4-year term pursuant to RFQ, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Elhus.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Good morning, Mayor, council members, Jeremy Allshouse, Parking Manager. This item is similar to the professional service agreement for architect of record that was brought before you on July 12th by the city engineer. It's a culmination of the city's process to procure a list of firms to act as the parking consultant of record to provide parking consulting services to the city in support of parking studies, capital improvement projects, master plans, rehabilitation, and renovation projects. This list includes the 3 firms that we had in our last agreement and 2 additional firms. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman?
Are any of these women or minority-owned businesses, do you know?
Off the top of my head, I am not, I thought one might be, but I'm not 100%.
Maybe get back to me sometime, just let me know. I'm trying to, I'm doing my research to find out those things, so.
I can certainly provide that answer for you. I have to research that. It went out, standard process, and we just had to go by the firms that applied.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to stay off consent?
No, we can stay it on consent, I'm just
Okay.
keeping.
6.5.
Accept a sidewalk easement for Giant Oil Inc. for the repair, maintenance, and replacement of a sidewalk on real property located at 3009 Delta Bay Boulevard, and adopt resolution 21-27. Mr. Mahoney for the final time.
Tom Mahoney, Engineering Department. This location is on the southeast corner of Gulf to Bay and Bayview Avenue. There is a new structure there, a new convenience store and a gas station, and it has replaced an older BP gas station. So they had to move the sidewalk, so we need an easement.
It looks significantly better. So.
Yes, it does.
Much better.
Any questions? All right, we'll discuss that on Thursday, 7.1.
Authorize a community aesthetic features agreement between the City of Clearwater and the Florida Department of Transportation for a local identification marker, city logo, on a new pedestrian overpass at Harn Boulevard and US 19, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same, repeal Resolution 19-11, and adopt Resolution 21-25. Ms. Metzger.
Good morning, Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development. Out there just in case. So several years ago, the city engaged Submerged to develop a wayfinding and signage master plan for the US 19 corridor, which was presented to City Council in October of 2016. The contract for Submerged was later extended to include design of a citywide wayfinding program. And in May of this year, City Council approved the selection of Biltmore Construction to handle the permitting, fabrication, and installation of phase 1 of that program, which includes a sign with the city logo and the tagline "Bright and Beautiful, Bay to Beach" underneath a new pedestrian, or on a new pedestrian overpass at Harn and US 19. This is a request to authorize a community aesthetic feature agreement, or CAFA, between the city and FDOT. The City Council previously passed and adopted Resolution 19-11, which approved the CAFA for this signage. However, during the review process, FDOT requested minor changes to the agreement, including adding certain notations on Submerged's drawings, which have since been addressed. This agreement establishes that the city will pay for the design, installation, and maintenance of the signage. Installation will take place while the bridge is under construction, and fabrication will be concurrent with the other wayfinding signage as part of Phase 1. Resolution 2125 repeals and replaces Resolution 19-11 and authorizes the updated CAFA. According to FDOT, construction of the overpass will be starting in the next 30 to 60 days and is estimated to take just over a year. FDOT limits changes to their standard CAFA language, and as such, they typically require the city engineer to sign such agreements. We are respectfully requesting the City Council authorize Tara Kivett as the city's engineering director to execute this agreement as the city manager's designee. The proposed resolution would allow the city manager to move forward with all documents to effectuate the CAFA.
Any questions for Ms. Matzke? Councilmember Beckman.
I had in my notes, and I must have read it wrong, I thought that FDOT was going to pay for it, and we then maintained it and had to make a deposit of this tiny $15,000 into an account in case we wanted to remove it and to reestablish the overpass the way it was. But the city's going to pay for that sign?
Yes,
Yeah,
the signage was
construction, design,
included
and
within that
construction.
contract from earlier this year.
Okay, but they are requiring us to put in, some $15,000 in case it wants to be removed?
Yes, that's standard for
Is it?
Mhm.
Okay.
agreements.
Don't
with
they
state
trust the city to take care of it? I know it's tiny, but it's like, really? You want me, and so it sits there? So if we do remove it, we get to use that $15,000 to remove it? And, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's our money, it just sits there indefinitely.
Yes, finance coordinates all of that, so.
Well, the other question is, do you trust FDOT all the time? So, it's.
Yeah, no. Well, I would trust us to make the bridge right, but whatever.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
8.1.
Authorize the purchase of vehicles, heavy and light duty, and equipment as approved in the 21-22 fiscal year budget for a not to exceed amount $6,100,850 per the recommended contracts in accordance with Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.563. 1C, other government entities authorize lease purchase under the city's master lease purchase agreement or internal financing, be an interfund loan from the capital improvement fund, whichever is deemed to be in the city's best interest, declare surplus, and authorize to transfer to city departments for disposal at auction or trade-in vehicles and equipment being replaced in accordance with Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.623, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Gloucester.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Earl Gloucester, Director, Solid Waste General Services. This is our annual request to purchase new vehicles and equipment for the city, along with the replacements on your issue that you should have in your packages. The only difference this year is that we're asking, in the last paragraph there, due to delays in manufacturing, the Fleet Department is requesting to begin procurement of the vehicles and equipment of the 21-22 vehicle replacement ahead of the 21-22 budget that starts October 1st. Basically what we're asking is to allow us to sign letters of intent to purchase, not actual purchase, but letters of intent, and that gets us to where we need to be with the manufacturers because manufacturing is lagging behind due to COVID. Supply chains are still disrupted and probably will be for the next year or two. Questions?
Questions for Mr. Gloucester? Councilmember Beckman.
There's no financial obligation with letters of intent? It's
No,
just-
ma'am.
Okay. And then I had a question about why was the hazard mitigation document, a hazard mitigation grant program document attached? Why was I reading that? I didn't know. It's attached to the agenda for your item here.
Hazard mitigation?
Yeah.
Is that for the purchase of the generators?
Is that what that, I wondered why, it's pretty complex. I didn't read all, I don't know how many pages.
That's how we're getting, that's how we're helping pay for it. It's a grant.
We're receiving grant money from the state of Florida.
From that, and
Yeah.
that's the
Right.
grant program?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
$350,000.
$350,000?
$350,000.
Only, so it's a small little amount. But
It's for
something.
20 generators that will be used by public utilities at lift stations.
Okay, they're important. That's good.
Absolutely.
But I just wanted to know what am I missing? Thank you.
Okay.
350 here, 350 there, then
No
it starts to
kidding.
add up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Other questions? Consent?
Yep.
8.2.
Authorize a purchase order with WEX Bank of Portland, Maine, in an amount not to exceed $320,000 for fleet fuel card services for the term of October 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2025, with a 2-year optional extension in the amount of $150,000 in accordance with the City Code of Ordinances, Section 2.563, piggyback or cooperative purchasing, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Conzen.
Good morning, Perry Conzen, Fleet Manager. WEX is the most widely accepted fuel card company in the U.S. Additionally, it provides incentives for prompt payment, detailed fueling reports, customer service 24/7, as well as quarterly rebate based on total fuel spend. WEX is expanding their network of electric charge station merchants and other alternative fuel merchants.
Questions? Councilmember Beckman?
this was really a fascinating item. I found it really interesting, and I liked their WEX intro. So I had a couple of questions. Have we ever used, is this the first time we're going to use this program?
For WEX, yes, but we've been using a Voyager system before that, and this is replacing the Voyager system.
All right, why are we replacing it with?
Because of the things that I've listed above, cost savings.
Okay,
And then for me, it's the expansion of their network to electric charging station merchants.
okay,
Other cards do that also, but I think WEX is further advanced.
all right. So this isn't limited to fuel only, it's a driver's ID as well as the odometer, correct? And so what are the advantages? How does this pay for it? So we pay $80,000 a year for this, right? For a 4-year, I think it's a 4-year contract. So what are the benefits? What do you do with the information we get?
The benefits are, first of all, this is for when we're out of town or different sites that we can use, and then it manages the fuel consumption, the mileage for those vehicles, which then we can incorporate into our existing systems that we have. We've now upgraded asset management software, fuel management software, and GPS and telematics software. And that should handshake with the software that we're putting in place now.
So is it about monitoring employees' behavior so that they're, not abusing that credit card? I mean,
Well, that happens with the other cards also. This is, for me as a fleet manager, I want that information to get incorporated in the softwares that we're putting into place now, so we can have true data.
is it so you manage your budget for how much money you allocate for fuel and
That's part of it, yeah.
what else? Like,
I don't understand your question. What else does it manage?
yeah. Because, I mean, and you said that it's when we're out of town, how frequently?
Well, it's also if the fuel site is not available during an emergency, something dramatic happens, and we can use that as a backup. That's what it was used as before in the other systems.
Okay. So if we have a planning, like the planning van or something, because I saw the planning van this weekend down by the marina, shuttling some of the boat slip renters up and back. So that person would use a WEX card to go to the gas station and get gas, and that employee would log in their ID number as well as the type of fuel, and that all gets incorporated through software to you, and you manage that data?
That's correct.
Okay. Like, to what end? Do we think that our employees aren't using,
Can I
I just want to understand, the value. That's
Mr. Horn.
We are an accountable organization,
Yeah, I know.
so we have to have measures in place to make sure that we can meet the accountability standards. That's why we get audited. And they ask us, are controls in place to make sure that things work the way they're supposed to?
Okay.
So,
And it's worth $80,000 a year to have this group manage all of that fleet purchasing and
well, I
stuff.
mean, I think it's our judgment to determine exactly what's the most cost-efficient way of doing it.
And getting those reports and stuff. Okay.
I mean, it may sound expensive to some people, but when you're in the shoes that we're in as government, we've got to be able to unequivocally demonstrate that we're managing the public's money appropriately and resources.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Consent? 8.3.
Authorize purchase orders to multiple vendors as listed for the purchase of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, replacement, and repair parts in the cumulative annual not to exceed amount of $700,000 for fiscal year 21-22 pursuant to the City Code of Ordinances, Section 2.561, small purchases and micro purchases, and 2.563, piggyback or cooperative purchasing, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Johnson.
Morning, Mayor, Council. This item consolidates the authorization to utilize a properly sourced piggyback contract and to obtain quotes for small purchases and micro purchases for authorized local distributors as listed. We're available for questions.
Questions? See none, consent?
Yep.
9.1.
Appoint one member to the Municipal Code Enforcement Board to fill the remainder of an unexpired term through October 31st, 2022. Council members, in your agenda packs, you had applications for Stephen Boris and Michael Wickstead. Mr. Menino recently had to resign due to personal reasons. He just didn't have the time to dedicate to meeting with the Code Board.
Oh, I have a comment. Might help.
I beg your pardon?
I have a comment that might help the discussion.
Okay.
I met with Michael Wickstead. He lives close to me, and he had contacted me about affordable housing and things like that. He's retired from Federal Housing and Urban Development, and he had listed under here a number of boards, and he communicated to me, and again, that he would prefer that someone else be appointed to this board. This isn't his first choice. So if you want to have a consent with, if that's the only one who's applied so far, Mr.
No, so Mr. Boris is the other individual, so it's the two of them. I just want to make note that one of the boards that Mr. Wickstead had noted is one that is actually, the appointment is made by the mayor. So just to keep that in mind. Okay. So if this is one that,
okay.
Just
all right, well then let's wait and he can, Mr. Wickstead can.
So it's really up to the council who they want to on this one.
He was who I was going to recommend for this because I liked his responses on the questionnaire.
But he'd prefer to be in affordable housing and stuff like
I understand, but the person that has been on the board is reapplying, and I'm planning on reappointing them. So if you want to reach out to him between now and Thursday and get his, is there a way that we could have, when applicants have like 5 boards, is there a way that we could have them ranked?
I will find out. If not,
I
can rank them manually.
Beneficial.
Okay.
If it could be a 1 through 5 spot. It's pretty rare to see somebody that's interested in 5, but if they could rank them, I think that would be helpful. All right, we'll talk about that on Thursday, 10.1.
Well, it's legal.
Approve an interlocal agreement with Pinellas County, the City of St. Petersburg, and the City of Pinellas Park for distribution of settlement funds from opioid litigation, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute. Council, if you recall, some time ago, we entered into litigation on the opioid issue. That whole process is slowly moving toward settlement. We have entered into a conceptual agreement with the state, which you approved probably 2-3 months ago now. And this is a component piece of that. This is an agreement between Pinellas County and the municipalities, so that the county can become the leading entity in Pinellas County for distribution of the funds, just for a particular portion of the funds that would otherwise be administered by a larger entity that included other jurisdictions. So if they qualify, they can become the entity that gets those funds. We have to agree to that in order for that to occur. So this agreement implements that process.
Questions for Ms. Aiken? Councilmember Beckman?
Is this where you and I had talked about us having kind of a seat at the table to weigh in on how some of those funds are used or distributed from the county level?
Yes. In this agreement, they have agreed to form a committee and/or I believe we're calling it a board. And in that board, the cities that participated in the litigation, which are us, St. Petersburg, and Pinellas Park have the seat, and in a process in which the use of those funds will be determined going forward. And you guys will appoint a clerk.
Consent?
Yep.
Any questions on second readings 10.2 through 10.15? Mr. Harn, anything else?
No, Mayor.
Ms. Aiken?
No, sir.
Council discussion items, 13.1, information table outside of chambers during council meetings. Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, so I ran citizen engagement and communication, and as I knocked on a bunch of doors, there was often some feedback about people not knowing what was going on in the city. And I will tell you, with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and our website, there are multiple ways for people to get information. However, particularly in our elderly community, a lot of them don't access information that way. And so a lot of times people would say, well, I like it when it came in my water bill or my utility bill or something. And so, there's a cost to print that stuff and mail it out, and not everybody gets a paper copy. So what I'd like us to consider is to put a table outside of our city council meetings where we have citizen engagement documents and our guiding documents available. So I was thinking, and even if one of my questions I'll have as Green Prick goes forward is, can we develop one-pagers or 1 or 2 pagers for these guiding documents? Our strategic plan right now has kind of a one-page visual. But things like green print, strategic plan, comprehensive plan, our Parks and Rec strategic plan, conservancy, voting information is key as far as we've had some changes in voter registration this year. We're going to put ranked choice voting probably on the ballot, so some information about that, even just guiding resources, information about Citizens Academy, advisory boards, and even if you'd like to run for office. So it's nothing, it wouldn't be about personal candidates, it wouldn't be any of our personal documents, but it would be these documents that we really want to have citizens weigh in on, or they are documents that we have developed that are our guiding documents, so that when people sit out there in the audience or choose to interact with us, it can be like, well, these are our guiding principles related to the environment or parks or planning or our strategic focus. And I just think it would send a really nice message that we want you to be informed and we really want you and encourage you to be engaged. And I think it would be a good thing to have those things out there. And I hope it's not too labor intensive. I think once we have them developed, we can put them out and see how quickly they fly off the table. Or we could, if we really want to be super frugal, we could have copies of them and then direct people to websites to print them out, or encourage them to take a picture of this one pager rather than walk away with it. But there are so many times when I hold my meet and greets or meet with people and I'm like, look, we're going to be updating our strategic plan. I need you to weigh in. Or the comprehensive plan, Clearwater 2045. We're talking about these important things. Please show up at the meetings. And I think we've had some really great attendance at the meetings, which is wonderful to gauge that community engagement and input. So that was my thought. What do you think?
Ms. Castelli?
Joelle Castelli, Public Communications Director. Just a little bit of history in that we have had some rec centers and libraries that we send stuff to have them display, and it oftentimes just becomes a junk table that people don't pick up and don't use the information. So we can put a table out. Determining what goes on that table is one step. So ranked choice voting, for example. What information am I putting on that table? The agenda item like a printout of the agenda item, because you'll have groups that show up on both sides wanting to put information there, and we're going to tell them they can't put that information there. We can print out green print. That's kind of the opposite goal of green print.
Correct, I get it.
So we have these dilemmas with all of those communications that are out there.
Well, all right, so for green print, I would hope that we can distill it down to, a two-pager, maybe a front or back, key components, and then guide people to the full, 60-page document. As far as ranked choice voting, I would think once we approve the language, we have the language out there. And I would also hope that the city would decide on an education campaign for its residents. So whatever that education campaign is, I don't want to be the one to say, go to this website or that website, but whatever we decide, how we're going to educate the masses, I think we could have it out there. And I think, I get that at rec centers, people are there for a different reason, and I go in and I see the My Clearwater thing and all that business. But the people that attend here, whether they're riled up about an agenda item or they just come regularly, they're civic-minded. And so to have those guiding documents in their hand, or the opportunity to be aware of them, I think is real important.
I would rather have I don't disagree with you. I want people to be more engaged. The people who come to the council meetings, we have frequent flyers, right?
We call them super users.
Yeah. Okay. I'll use your terminology, but whatever you want. But we have those people, they are very much engaged. They know what's going on. They can talk to any of us and do oftentimes every meeting, before the meetings and whatnot. I would prefer to have a one-pager, which I'm a firm believer in, that actually has the address that somebody can go to if they're interested in green print, or if they're interested in ranked choice voting, or if they're interested in library hours, and have that so that people can look it up themselves. There are very, very few people that don't have connectivity, and if they don't, they can computer and plug in that address to get the information. I am not wild about printing out huge amounts of materials that are probably eventually going to get outdated and then are going to go into the recycling bin. Because we've done that before and it hasn't been very effective. I've seen it firsthand. But I don't have a problem with creating a menu that highlights some of the most important things going on and how people can access that information. That's what I would prefer. Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I've been talking for years about ways that we can get people to understand building department issues. And one of the things that I noticed when I used to be in business years ago, Largo changed, Largo had a monitor about the size of the one in front of you in their waiting room. And they had it cycled through things that were current. And when you're sitting there waiting I learned a lot just sitting there waiting to go get my permit looked at. I think we could do something like that. And most TVs now, monitors, you don't even need to have them hooked up. They have a USB. You can stick a USB in there and do all and somewhat like the mayor said, give the name, what we're going to be talking about, and then the website address where it could be seen for more information, and just kind of roll through that. And maybe as people come in, they could look, and if something that is of interest, they can write it down and say, I think that would be the best. There's no basically waste involved, and it's something that can be updated really easy.
And that's
we're
what
doing
we're
that
doing
with the announcements
Right.
that I used to read through, which I
Right.
don't think anyone listens to.
I listen.
Only because you have to. But now we're scrolling through those before the meeting if we
Yes.
take a recess, right?
Yes, and
We're
we're looking to give that file because it's updated approximately every 2 weeks unless there's 3 weeks between a meeting. But we're looking to give that file to the libraries and the rec centers to display on their televisions, and we can give it to the planning department. But they don't have people that sit in their lobby anymore.
Right.
Yes.
Not for the time being.
Right.
Vice Mayor?
Along the lines of what Councilmember Beckman said, you've got some older residents that aren't computer savvy and things of that nature. Well, I think the percentage of our community that isn't computer savvy is shrinking daily almost. But I think the internet and the city website is the best place for all this information to start. And going forward, in another 20 years, when people like me are old, feeble, and whatnot, everybody coming up behind me, and the younger people are all going to be very computer savvy, and that's where we're headed. But for the people who aren't right now, I would be pretty confident to say almost every one of them still receives their utility bill in the mail. We still do the sunshine line.
Yes.
I think that's a great place for information, and we maybe need to be a little more involved in what's in that to make sure that we're communicating with Joelle on what we feel is pertinent to go in that. We've never had a whole lot of input into what goes on into it, but that doesn't mean we can't have that. And, maybe you rotate it around where every month one of us gets to write a column in that about what is, hot for us right at that time, or something of that nature. But we can work on that. But I think the sunshine lines and just letting people know, don't just open the bill and throw that away. Read it. There's good information there that can help them navigate to where they want to be or need to be to find out other information. I think that's a good tool.
Councilmember Bunker?
Yeah, I think the table here is just going to reach the people who already have that information or can get it easily if they want it. Video, I've always thought is a much better way to reach people. And now with so many smart TVs out there, with like a YouTube app built into them, even seniors would be able to go to our city YouTube channel and see a nice video presentation about Greenprint 2.0, and try to get some interaction that way.
So can we create a master list?
Yes. Two things. On sunshine lines, I've requested the number of people who do not get a utility bill, so those who have signed up for e-billing. And the deadlines for sunshine lines are such that it sometimes is so far in advance that you can't get information in there. So July 15th is the deadline for the August issue, and the things that are in the August issue have to be relevant because they're mailed out each day, so they have to be relevant the entire month of August. So it's usually September events.
Okay,
So,
question on an e-bill, where we do the e-bill, is there the way to have a link on the e-bill where they can click on that and it takes them to the calendar of, city or whatever, it links it right into wherever they want to go, or where?
well, I'll have to
create 'em?
check, but they go to our website to pay their bill.
Okay.
Or they go to their own bank institution to pay the bill. So I'll have to check
But the
where
bill has to
exactly.
come to them before they know they gotta go somewhere
Right.
to pay it. So that's what I'm
And
saying. The bill coming to them, can it have a link to take them to an information page if they're interested or whatever?
And the Sunshine Lines is electronically on the website as well, so they should have access to that.
Councilmember Beckman?
Well, and I would hope too, and I'm not, well, anyway, the sunshine lines, whatever communication that we have links to update your voter registration information or check your voter registration. I mean, that's just one sentence with a link, and I think that would be real helpful to have that every single month. I mean, it really does send a positive message about, people moving in. And then the other thing is, our strategic plan is coming up, and I think a couple of months of, that's a relevant link, and not to tell you how to do your job, but, to make it exciting for the person rather than, hey, we're going to update our strategic plan, and they're like, that sounds really exciting, those two words. But if we can try to engage them a little bit more. I mean, I'm working so hard to try to get people to show up at advisory board meetings, and I mean, more often than not, I'm the only person here. There's nobody here. This is unacceptable for citizen engagement. And I mean, I put it on residents as much. It's not just on communication, but I don't know if we can promote what's in the agendas. I don't know if we can flash it up or whatever we can do, but it's, because people complain about these things when you're out in public. And I mean, when I have conversations and the email that we get across our desk, right? People are crabbing about parks or sidewalks or whatever. And then I'm saying, show up at an advisory board, let us hear. Get your friends. I mean, it can't just be one person up here. So I'm trying here to.
And my initial gut reaction to that is I would encourage you to really delve into this citizen satisfaction survey data that we're going to be getting, because you're probably engaging with a very small vocal minority, and the majority of our residents are very happy with our services.
Okay.
So when we get that data back, which the survey just released last week, so it is going to be in homes. It will not be sent to every home because that's not how you do a scientific survey. So when that data comes back, I would encourage you to look at that and see that the majority of our residents are happy. We, in public engagement worlds, we talk about if people's trash is picked up, their recycling's taken away, their toilet flushes, their water is clean, they are happy with our services. So the most people that you're engaging with on a daily basis and the people who are sending the emails, they are the vocal minority. So we have to keep that in mind with our public engagement and know that most people are happy.
I agree. And it's rare you get a letter that says, you guys are doing a fantastic job. I mean, they do come across our desk, which is wonderful, but they're certainly far and few.
Well, we've gone through a lot of iterations over the years. And Councilmember Beckman, I've always wanted to have more engagement with citizens. And we've tried a lot of different iterations. And sometimes it's frustrating. But I will tell you, the majority of people just want the city to function. And they don't want to have to think about it. And the only time we do hear from them is when something goes awry or something is happening in their backyard. And I would equate it to my experience this morning. I left very early for the office. I got a call from my wife at 8 o'clock, and her car wouldn't start. So I ran home and tried to get it started and could not. But we don't call the car manufacturer and say, hey, you guys are great. The car started this morning. We drove to work without incident. When do we say something to the car manufacturer? When the car doesn't start, we have to call AAA to come pick us up, and that's kind of the same experience that we have with citizens a lot of times. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about engagement further tomorrow. It may be a conversation that we want to continue and actually have an item on an agenda, but it is an ever challenging issue. Because most people just want to go about their lives. They're worried about their families, getting their kids to soccer practice, watching a ball game, whatever. Okay, 3.2, Ocean Allies Amplify Clearwater Anti-Litter Campaign poster. Councilmember Beckman.
So this is part of a conversation I had with Sherry Heilman, who was one of the founders of Ocean Allies, and the citywide effort to, in partnering with Amplify, to make a dent on litter and trash, not only on the beach, but they're expanding out into the whole city. And there's a week-long, community-wide, week-long event, October 11th, culminating in a citywide cleanup October 16th. And I believe our city's involved with Sam, she's a volunteer coordinator with Parks and Rec. And so one of the initiatives, I shared with you those posters, is could we have those posters that were developed with, by Amplify and Ocean Allies in our city buildings? So could they be in the windows of our rec center, libraries? Could they be, here in our chambers? And then she also suggested or thought about, could we have them on our garbage trucks or some of our city vehicles? These, it's all kind of, give a hoot, don't pollute kind of encouraging messages that way. So it would probably be at our expense to develop those posters. I mean, they've created them, the design, the graphics, and then we would just use them throughout the city. Have we ever done anything like that before? I know we okayed some language for like some beach signs, but this is going further. And we could put it in storefronts.
Gina, any issues?
While she's coming up, we do have policies that govern how we put posters on things. So we can take a look to see if we need to make any changes in order to do that. But we just don't slap a poster on things.
Right. I mean, well, I brought up the voting thing, right, last, September, October, we had some vote posters in
Well, that was on
libraries.
City Hall.
Yeah.
Right.
If business owners want to put these signs in their storefronts, they would just need to comply with the window signage provision. So long as they're in compliance with that, that would be up to them, a decision whether they want to write that kind of signage. We are allowed to put up government signs at government facilities, so I'm not sure if this qualifies for a government sign. It's not a government program, so.
But we're partnering a little bit with this citywide initiative. So would it fall under a government program with that?
I would really want to talk to legal about that.
We'd have to take a look at that.
So let's see
There's a clear definition for excuse me.
let's get the posters. I mean, I'm all for, I'm very concerned about the litter issue that we have, so I'm fine with that. When it's an event that's gonna occur and then pass, putting it on solid waste trucks. Now, the slogan itself may be able to stay, but if it's gotta be something that would adhere. Obviously, it couldn't be just a poster. It would have to be a decal that would go on permanently. Why don't we get the poster and see what it looks like, and then we can go from there.
Well, I shared with you all, I think they've got like 8 of them. And so I shared that like last week or so, but I can share it again today.
I haven't seen it.
No.
Where was it shared? In an email?
I think, yes, in an email. I went through Mr. Horn first, and then it might have come out to you guys. So there are like 8 different varieties of these posters. Now, the signage ordinance is real tough because, again, in the squeaky wheel, a lot of store owners that I've spoken to, don't like the square footage of signage. So maybe they could put them inside, right? They can put them inside at the cash register if it's a restaurant or whatever. They could put them on their table. I know Sherry Heilman has ocean-friendly little stands that you can put on tables. So
Table tents.
if an establishment wants to use these posters inside, they can put them wherever they want inside.
They can place them inside their windows. They can cover up to 20% of their window area with signage, and we don't regulate what is put up on those signs. So.
But even an 8.5 by 11 sheet, that just this whole effort
do that.
Okay, well,
Councilmember Albritton?
Yeah, I agree. We do have a problem. I see it a lot, and I know a lot of our citizens are concerned with the amount of trash that's being put on the beach, on the roadways, and it's just seemed to have been more lately than we've ever seen before. And I'm good with the signs, but I wanted to make a comment, Mr. Horn. You know, going to the beach, we have the roadway lit sign on the causeway. We usually have it, it says no alcohol on the beach, and now it does say do not litter. It gives these real curt, like, instructions. And I was thinking the other day when I was looking at it as I was driving by, could we maybe make it a little more welcoming than just, you know, don't litter, you know, no alcohol on the beach. Say, welcome to Clearwater Beach, please, I don't know what you could say, I'm not going to say it exactly, but something to soften it up a little bit and say, first of all, welcome, help us keep our beach clean, that kind of message instead of just these curt messages. It may help. Just a suggestion.
Well, I think they have limitations on what they can put, and that it's also a function of whether it's a Saturday when traffic is at a standstill or whether they're going 45 miles per hour.
Yeah, yeah.
The message that can be put on. If you're going 45, you're not going to see it because it's going to take up too many cycles.
I guess I'm thinking
Saturday, it's different.
Yeah, I'm thinking most of the time, and it's not just Saturdays, most of the time during the main day, you're going to be sitting a little bit in traffic, sometimes more than a little bit, but you have time to read it. Maybe that's what I'm doing. I'm reading it as I'm going, and I'm like, this could be a little softer message or something more welcoming. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. 13.3, Councilmember Albritton.
Okay, I've got some updates. PSTA update. The board heard a presentation about transit-oriented development, which the Sunrunner BRT project will cause when completed. PSTA has won 2 federal government pilot program grants for TOD, which is transit-oriented development. It looks at how investment in transit will change policy, but also magnetize development around the Sunrunner BRT corridor. The Transit Riders Advisory Committee, TRAC, met, and the main topic was the Flamingo card use. Flamingo, they're trying to get to a touchless pay system on when you travel on a bus. And this is an app, it's a Flamingo app, and they also give a card out that you put money on it, and then you go in, and all you have to do is, like at the airport when you're getting on a flight, you just put it on there, you don't have to touch anything, and it automatically debits your account. It's a great thing, and I think more and more people are doing this. So PS is moving toward the touchless payment using the Flamingo card. Riders can upload to the app and order a card. Now we're offering free fares. PSTA is offering free fares for this month and through July and August. So we're into August now. For this month, if you get a Flamingo card, you can ride free. You don't have to, even put any money on it. That's just to get the people to start using it. And they're anticipating their millionth Flamingo rider in the fall. So it's being accepted pretty much throughout the county. So the fiscal year 22 trim notice went out. The board voted unanimously to set the county transportation millage rate at .7500. This rate hadn't changed for several years, and it is subject to public hearings set on September 15th and 29th at PSTA. PSTA has scheduled a press conference on September 12th, 10 a.m. at the site of the new Intermodal Center. Mayor Hibbard, Charlie Crist, and myself will be there to talk about plans for the new Intermodal Center. This is good. If anybody wants to show up, it'd be good to have there to support that. Ford Pinellas met on July 14th. The board adopted the Advantage Pinellas Housing Compact, demonstrating a commitment to working together with local governments to advance housing affordability solutions and build countywide strategy to address the critical shortage of affordable housing. Advantage Pinellas is a strategic plan that looks out over the next 25 years, identifying ways we can improve mobility, economic opportunity, and housing. The board adopted the 2022 Fort Pinellas budget for one of Advantage Pinellas investment corridors and to update the employment and industrial land study. Fort Pinellas is pleased to announce that they are hosting the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit, held in coordination with the Bike Week Tampa Bay Summit held on November 2nd through 5th. And more information can be seen on Gulf Coast SafeStreetsSummit.org. Just a real quick thing on T-BARTA. The gondola study is being done in Clearwater and St. Petersburg, will not be completed until 2022. More time is needed to define ground transportation connections and hurricane wind studies. They want to get it right the first time around, and I think tomorrow we have, at least I'm talking to somebody, they're still in the stage of gathering information, so that's moving forward, but they're going to take a little more time at it. Any questions?
Any questions for Councilmember Albright? Any new items to be added to future agendas? Councilmember Beckman?
Well, not really an item to be added, but I need a little clarification as part of my learning curve. So we talked about green print today, and we have this resolution associated with green print, and then citizens are going to weigh in on Thursday. And I've suggested at least one more aggressive goal. So are we going to be wordsmithing a little bit green print on Thursday? Do you anticipate us adopting it the way it is, somebody making a motion and we adopt it just the way it is? Or are we going to incorporate what residents are offering for feedback on Thursday?
Well, I can't anticipate what they're going to bring on Thursday. We may decide to postpone the resolution. Also, if we're going to add things, I know I'll probably ask the question, what's it going to cost? And so we're probably not going to be able to answer that on Thursday. So I can either see us passing it as is and amending it down the road, or postponing passing the resolution after we've determined what the impact is by adding additional goals.
Or a little more aggressive.
Does that sound reasonable, Mr. Horn? Ms. Aiken, do you have something to add? Because you have a quizzical look on your face.
In the event you decide to make modifications or changes to the language, for clarity for staff, I do want to recommend that you make motions to make those changes and not just suggest a change and believe it will be made by staff, because I hear staff sometimes saying, yes, we can change that, and I don't want them going out and making changes without you guys voting on them.
Fair enough. Anything else? All right, we're adjourned. We'll see everybody tomorrow afternoon for another meeting. And then Thursday morning, and then Thursday night.
All things in between.
Somebody get me a cot.